Hello and a very warm welcome to the Late Breaking F1 podcast presented by Harry Eade, Sam Sage and me, Ben Hocking. Today reviewing the Singapore Grand Prix. A Singapore Grand Prix won by the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. The first time this season that a non-Red Bull driver has won a Grand Prix. The first time since Brazil of last year when George Russell took victory. But of course today, not only no Red Bull on the top step of the podium, no Red Bull on the podium, full stop. Carlos Sainz taking the win, but then Lando Norris for McLaren in second, Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes in third. George Russell probably would have wanted to have been there, and he could have been until the last lap. But no Red Bull to be seen. Max Verstappen best performing there in P5. What's all that about then, Sam?
Oh, God. I still just want to go, because those last 20 laps, that is what we've been waiting for. When all season we've been saying how, if Red Bull didn't exist, if we said, you're too good, so we're just going to remove you from the equation, we'll watch the other teams crack on with it. This is what we would have been getting. This is how close they would have been time after time. And we're finally seeing it happen where they all got to fight out front for a win without Red Bull interfering. And the funny thing is, this is such a compliment to Red Bull because you've been that good that I've just been desperate for you to not be there so we can see just how good other people can be. It was so thrilling. I've wanted to shout and scream for the last 25 minutes. I've had adrenaline pumping through my very veins. I imagine George Russell is absolutely furious with himself. But we're going into a Grand Prix, and may I say, God bless virtual safety cars, because what was tactically... Getting holy with it, because tactically it was an interesting Grand Prix, but the level of management, the level of maintaining that tie where to try and get to the end, it dragged on a little bit, didn't it? It got a little bit frustrating. So when that VSC came out, a Papa Toto and the strategy team at Mercedes said, we're going to go for this. Took them a lap, but they then did say, we're going to go for this. They spiced it up. They made it a little bit spicy. And I'm glad they did, because it was looking like we might get a bit of a snooze fest all the way to the line, but with a different victor. And I was going to send you guys a text before that VSC came out that said, isn't it weird that all the races with Max Verstappen winning 10 seconds down the road have been maybe more fun than this race where he's not even in the top 5 for the most of the Grand Prix, but yet we were proven wrong and it was a real fun fest. So yeah, you know what? Turned out to be an absolute banger. I loved it.
I think Carlos Sainz might be a genius.
Actual genius.
Like, certified genius. I know we've seen him run... Honestly, we've seen him run the strategy before at Ferrari, but this time, the man was on another level. Yeah, agree with Sam. Delightful race to watch. And actually, I wasn't even that mad about them managing at the start, because I think even without the VSC, would have had some spiciness at the end. It was building up to it. We were getting there, just, they were warming up by driving really slowly.
I disagree. I thought it was going to be an awful race without that VSC.
Oh, no.
I don't know. I didn't think it was going to get there. But
pessimistic Ben.
Like you say, indeed. Cynical Ben makes an early appearance on this episode. But yeah, it doesn't matter anyway, because the virtual safety car did make an appearance, and you're right, it was almost the exact right time for it to come out, in that it gave Mercedes an option, but not an obvious option, to go ahead and pit both their drivers. We'll, of course, get into all of that over the next hour and 15 or so. We're going to be discussing Alonso and Aston Martin. Not a good weekend for them whatsoever, going home with 0 points. Charles Leclerc, watching his teammate secure first place himself, not even on the podium. So we'll be discussing the disparity between the two Ferrari drivers. We'll, of course, give some time as well to Red Bull, not being able to put either of their cars on the podium, and Max Verstappen's recovery to 5th place. But it's only natural to start out front with the Mercedes versus Lando Norris versus Carlos Sainz battle towards the end of that Grand Prix. We had 4 cars separated by what must have been about a second or a second and a half. Ultimately, Carlos Sainz ends up winning with Lewis Hamilton in 3rd place, and George Russell, of course, looking like he was going to take 3rd before crashing on that final lap. Sam, do you think it was the right call for the Mercedes, and do you think it was the right call for both of them?
I quite publicly over on Twitter slated the Mercedes strategy calls when they had driven past the pit lane for the first time. And I said, Mercedes' strategy is genuinely quite bad, and I think that their success, I've said this on the podcast before, I said that their success has masked the fact that their strategy calls have never been particularly bold or daring, or they're not first to the punch. And I thought it happened here again. And you know what? I still think I'm right in thinking that, because it didn't fully pay off, did it? And I think it was right for Mercedes to give it a go. And I definitely think they should have done it with Lewis Hamilton out of all the drivers, because George Russell, you've got to remember, was in second place before that VSC comes out. And I don't think there was any major risk of Lando Norris overtaking him come the end of the race. He managed to keep him behind comfortably the whole way through. And we heard the radio back and forth from Sainz and from Russell, who were both really enjoyably chatty over the radio, confirming a lot of strategy call, a lot of management call, how much pace they think they've got in hand. And, we heard Sainz say, I could drive around at this pace forever. I've got a second in hand. Russell going, I'm surprised it isn't two. And I think Russell could have quite easily have put his foot down come the end of that Grand Prix and fought with Norris and Sainz and potentially come out on top without having to make back the 13 or 14 seconds that he did have to make back on the mediums. Now, Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, I think he had a little bit too much traffic in front of him with Norris, Russell and Sainz. So for me, nothing to lose by dropping Lewis Hamilton back into that empty piece of racetrack that they've got behind them. Just got to overtake Charles Leclerc, which we saw was incredibly easy for both drivers to do. I think splitting the strategy at that point was probably the best option. They happened to go for both, and I don't think it really paid off for them. One driver was in second before the VSC. He crashed into the wall and finishes with no points, and Lewis Hamilton only moves up one place. So as a net, loss, they lost a whole, 15 points out of that situation. Genuinely, it was exciting as a viewer to watch, because a team bringing home points, to the championship didn't work out well for them. And again, the strategy failed to pay off for them long term. But from a viewer, super glad they did it. Absolutely loved it. We'll ask them to do it again. But yeah, I think overall, not the best call to make them both go on. I would have just picked Lewis Hamilton myself.
Harry, would you agree with that? Do you think splitting the strategy would have been the right decision?
Yeah, I agree with Sam. I think that's a real tough call for them to make. Hamilton's the obvious one to pit there. But say they had pit Hamilton and then he cruises up to the back of that, top three, and they've left Russell out there and overtakes Russell for the win. That would seem unfair on Russell. But on the flip side, we saw it was difficult to overtake out there today, mainly just because I think of the temperatures. They couldn't really follow for that long before overheating, cut the car, the tyres, etc. So it was a gamble. If anything, we love the bold strategy here, and I respect them for it.
It's true.
We love it.
And as Sam said, as a viewer, it made a cracking end to that race. But I think I'm with you, Sam, on that. I might have left Russell in P2 to see what he could do, because I think Russell was probably quicker than Sainz all afternoon, and it was getting past Norris that was their undoing in the end. And I've seen a few people say they think Hamilton could have got it if Russell got out of the way, but I'm unconvinced on that one. But yeah, a tough decision. As I say, I'm with Sam. I'm glad they did it, but potentially would have left Russell out there, pitted Hamilton, and yeah, they're a bit slow on the uptake as well. Luckily, it wasn't a short VSE. Took them a lap, because I think they had the opportunity to pit Hamilton when it came out.
It's like a 2.5 minute long VSC. It was ridiculously long.
It was long. It was a long old VSC. So yeah, it was. I appreciate it was a tough call, but I probably would have just pit Hamilton.
I think Lewis Hamilton was the no-brainer of the two. I agree with you both on that front. There was no reason not to put him out into space, because as we saw multiple times throughout the Grand Prix, not even just limited to Mercedes, whenever someone, and I mean literally anyone, had some space to work with, they immediately became the fastest driver on track. As soon as Zhou Guanyu pitted to be last on lap 3, he set the fastest lap of the race. It didn't matter who it was. If you had space, you were the fastest person on track. So it absolutely made sense to put Lewis Hamilton into that. And I have to say, from Lewis Hamilton's perspective, obviously he struggled throughout practice and qualifying. He was very comfortably slower than George Russell on Saturday. But I think today, especially the second half of this Grand Prix, just goes to prove that in the zone, Lewis Hamilton is a thrill to watch. He is a real thrill to watch. Whether you like it or not, it is really exciting entertainment to see him in that zone, because there aren't many drivers out there that can be in the zone in the same way that Lewis Hamilton was. And he was all over the back of his teammate, let alone the other drivers, come the end of that Grand Prix. And from Russell's perspective, I actually think it was the right decision to pit him, because I don't think there was any chance he was overtaking Carlos Sainz. I just cannot see that happening if he didn't pit. I know he joked to say that I'm surprised he hasn't got 2 seconds in the locker. Unless you were extremely quicker than the car in front, you weren't making overtakes out there. Unless realistically there was a massive tyre difference, as we saw towards the end of the Grand Prix, you weren't making those overtakes. So I respect Mercedes trying something, because if George Russell doesn't crash on the final lap, he loses 3 points. So what? I don't really see the. You might as well go for it. Mercedes are trying their best to win Grand Prix whenever they've got the opportunity, which they aren't getting as many opportunities as they used to. I think it was worth them trying something. I think if you're looking at the pure numbers of it and how it actually panned out, yes, George Russell would have benefited pure championship standings wise by staying out there, taking second place and taking 18 points. But in the interest of winning Grand Prix, I think you give it a go. So I can respect Mercedes trying it.
I just want
pure Red Bull.
Sorry, go on, Harry.
Sorry, Sam. I would say it's a pure Red Bull like 2017-18 strat, wasn't it? Which is quite ironic given the where we are now.
Yeah, if he's in a championship fight, that makes no sense whatsoever. But I think at this stage, you might as well go for it.
That's very fair, and a fair argument to make. I do want to go back to your point discussing Lewis Hamilton, and I said at the start of the weekend that he's my under pressure driver, and I think for the last 2 weekends before Singapore, he's really been average. It's probably been his worst 2 Grand Prix maybe that we've seen from him all season. But the fact that, when they came up the pit lane after that VSC, and Russell was 14 seconds behind Leclerc, I think it was, and Lewis Hamilton was another 4 or 5 seconds back, I was thinking, yeah, Russell might get the chance at a podium move here, but I don't think Lewis is going to get it. I think by the time they get round to the last couple of laps, Russell will be scrapping around and Lewis will maybe get one or 2 goes at maybe the fight with Norris. But the fact that, by the time that Russell had caught up to Leclerc, and even more so Norris, the gap between Russell and Norris was smaller than the gap between Russell and Hamilton was what shocked me. The fact that I think Crofty, despite all his faux pas over this race weekend, and we're going to get onto a few more of those in a little bit, I imagine.
Win.
Debut win for Ferrari. Great job, Carlos. Despite all of those, he did come out with a very interesting time stat that was Lewis Hamilton 3 laps in a row was 0.6 faster a lap than George Russell, which on the same tyre, at the same length, both in clean air, is a thrilling amount of time to be able to make up over your teammate when there is no difference in anything you're racing with. So the old boy's still got it yet, hasn't he? He can still throw a car around when he wants to.
As Harry mentioned, Harry was doubtful that if Lewis Hamilton had an opportunity, he'd have made any advances on Norris or Sainz. Would you agree with that, Sam?
Yeah, I understood his frustration. And as a racing driver, you go, give me a go. I reckon I could do it. You're always going to say that. You're always going to advocate for it. But realistically, we've seen over the years now, since George Russell joined Mercedes, that he is more than capable enough of putting his foot down and getting moves done. And the move against Leclerc, for example, was swift. It was brilliant. He got the move done. The up and over that he liked to do worked effectively. And Hamilton following him through really nicely. And I don't really see why Hamilton really could have done too much more. He definitely had the pace at the start of that stint. As we've just mentioned, the speed difference that he was able to carry was huge. But once it gets to 2 drivers following each other with dirty air, Sainz, the absolute Einstein of a racing driver that he is, giving Lando Norris that DRS every single sector, which genuinely, as a driver's play, is so far above. When I heard him say, I want the gap to Norris every lap, please, I'm thinking, Carlos is panicking. He's, needs to get him out of DRS. It was the total opposite of going, no, I don't want a plus 1 second. I want a plus 0.8 is what I want to know that I'm good. And I'm so good. I don't think Hamilton really could have done too much, but I don't think Hamilton was going to win that race. I think they maybe needed 2 or 3, maybe even 4 or 5 more laps for the hard tyres to completely die off. So Russell crashing is just unlucky. Hamilton benefits. I don't think the result particularly changes if they swap those around with a few laps ago.
Yeah, very difficult to predict. If I had to make a projection on it, I think if they were the other way round, Hamilton gets Norris, but not Sainz. It is my prediction on that. But having said that, there was a reason Russell was ahead of Hamilton, and that's because he outqualified him very comfortably. So, it's all if buts and maybes at this point. From the Ferrari and McLaren perspective of first and second, Harry, what did you make of Carlos Sainz's drive? Because he has led every single session this weekend.
Yeah, I've already said it, genius man. Sainz, don't know, I know Sam said this in the quality review yesterday, saying he didn't know what he had for breakfast. I don't know what he did over the summer, because he's come back a new man. He has looked comfortable over Leclerc, probably less so in the race in Monza, but at least pace-wise over Leclerc and Monza. And this weekend, he's just not really put a foot wrong. His pace has been ridiculous around here. So, and obviously, he drove the slowest race humanly possible, but it was a really intelligent race, like in all respects. So, very impressed by Sainz. And it's good to see. I think, again, I said this yesterday, it's good to see him taking a step forward somewhat. And, I'm not saying Leclerc's under pressure or anything, but giving Charles something to think about slightly, I think, because Sainz has been very good these past couple of races. But yeah, today was exceptional. I know he was doing it on purpose, having Norris behind him, that close behind him, but he drove the entire race effectively, apart from when Leclerc had to drop back 5 seconds in 5 laps, which we'll get onto. He drove with someone behind him the entire race. And around Singapore, where it's hot and its race goes on forever, I think he coped with that pressure extremely well. So yeah, very impressed by the smooth operator.
Yeah, and I feel like the nickname "smooth operator" is almost very apt for this win, because that's exactly what he needed to be for this Grand Prix. And ultimately, I think he did everything he needed to do, and it's tough to put it into words, but certainly if you compare this race, which is almost the complete opposite to what a Monza race is, right? Where Monza is just flat out for 75 minutes, and if you've got the car and you deliver the performance, you get the win. Whereas this is a very different sort of race. I think if you ask the majority of Formula One drivers what is easier or more difficult to pull off, I think they would lean towards this one being the more difficult one to pull off, because you have to be so unnaturally disciplined as an F1 driver. And it was referenced so many times how much slower they were going versus what their true pace could have been, which sounds like they're taking it easy. And it is to an extent, but it's much more difficult than it sounds, because it is so tempting to not stick to that. And it is so, we heard it over Max Verstappen's team radio. Don't push up to Esteban Ocon. There's no value to it at this stage. It is really difficult to essentially be responsible for the pace of the entire field, as Carlos Sainz had for the majority of this Grand Prix. It's not only impressive, it's more impressive than what it sounds and looks, which is saying something. Any last words on Carlos Sainz, Sam?
Best race of his career so far. I think I would go as far as saying he wowed me. I do think that Leclerc hasn't got, the pressure to, oh, good Lord, am I suddenly the second driver? But as Harry said, something to think about massively there. And a lot of Ferrari fans give Carlos Sainz a lot of stick that maybe he isn't the man that should be there in that seat. I think after we've seen from this summer break, as long as he keeps this up, he is more than worthy of a drive at that Ferrari team. And he's such an asset, because the way he uses his brain in the car is so far ahead of so many other drivers. He runs that pit wall. He runs the strategy. You hear him saying, what's the time to and forth, back and forth to other drivers. He managed every single aspect of that Grand Prix exquisitely. Drivers such as Hamilton, such as Alonso, such as Verstappen would be covered in, compliments left, right and centre from so many drivers if that was them. He deserves endless praise for just how well managed that Grand Prix was. It was mind-blowingly good. Great
first win for him too.
He finally got a win in Ferraris. Never done that before. Honestly.
Twice, Crofty.
I'll accept the odd faux pas from Crofty, but that one, and the fact that no one's correcting him either. No one's gone. Crofty, he won at Silverstone.
I think Brundle did after. Brundle did after the podium, but yeah.
He got there in the end. But I mean, speaking about that British Grand Prix first win, I agree with what you're saying, Sam, in that I think this was a step above what he was able to deliver that day, because whilst it was a monumental occasion for him, he was benefited a lot from what was going on around him. Here, he just fully deserved the win. He was the quickest, he was the smartest, and he delivered the performance. So really impressive. Before we go for our first break, Harry, just any words on Lando Norris? It feels like that first win is surely somewhere around the corner.
Yeah, Norris has been excellent this weekend. Obviously, he's had the upgrades and Piastri didn't. But he's getting achingly close. Again, I'm not sure pace-wise whether he was quite there with Russell and Sainz, but he was there or thereabouts. And if you think about where they were at the beginning of the year, it's an excellent result for Norris. But yeah, he'll get there at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's not too much to say at this point, which is a really good thing about Lando Norris, in that it's just another very, very good performance from him, where, Mercedes can go out there and do whatever they want strategy-wise, and, Verstappen can struggle to get out of Q2, and Lando Norris just there and picks up the pieces for P2. And it's surely happening at some point. It's a matter of when rather than if, I think. Right, we'll take our first quick break. We're going to be discussing Red Bull and their misfortune right after this. Okay, welcome back. We've discussed the good fortune of the likes of Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton before the break. Unfortunately, we now turn to Red Bull, who Max Verstappen managed to get P5, which I think was the absolute best he was ever in during this Grand Prix. And Sergio Perez did score points as well, provided he doesn't get a penalty for murder of Alex Albon. If you haven't seen that incident.
He also hit Lawson, didn't he?
It was Tsunoda. It was Tsunoda, wasn't it? Yeah.
Tsunoda,
isn't that where Tsunoda went out?
Yes.
Anyway, so given Max Verstappen has won 10 races in a row and Red Bull have failed to win a race all season, this wasn't an ideal Grand Prix, to put it mildly. Sam, do you think that this was, based on their qualifying performance at least, about as good as they could have done?
Have we ever seen, from one race to another, such a downturn in form and ability? I know that, okay, they struggled a bit, but I'm just a bit flabbergasted. I'm a bit speechless just how bad the car was. And on top of that, Sergio Perez had a bit of a stink of a race weekend. I think he actually got a little bit lucky to find himself back in the points again, because overtakes were poor. He wasn't moving through the field well. He mucked it up in qualifying by spinning the car rather than getting a clean lap in. At least Max Verstappen managed to utilise those fresh tyres and really work his way back through the field. And realistically, I think Sergio Perez probably should have been finishing pretty much right behind him, at least 3 or 4 seconds off of him in what should have been 6th place. Especially when you look at the DNS from the likes of, Tsunoda didn't make it round, and poor Esky Besky on his birthday with that engine failing. It just feels like they should have done more here. But I am absolutely flabbergasted at what happened to Red Bull around Singapore. And usually this is a track that they thrive at as well. That's the crazy thing. Like, you think throughout history, what tracks do Red Bull do well at? Well, they've done pretty well at the likes of Monaco. They do well at Hungary. This fits the same, archetype as what is a good racetrack for Red Bull, and they fluffed it massively. But all fairness to Max Verstappen, he drove a world champion's drive to get himself back to anything respectable. And even with the poor timing of safety car, the bad strategy call not to stop at the right time, and the VSC coming out after they'd already stopped, the fact that he crossed the line essentially at the same point as Charles Leclerc, it's a little bit worrying still for the other guys, the fact that Ferrari, despite having such a good Grand Prix, was still only just beating Max Verstappen with one of their drivers by, 1/10 of a second. I think all that Verstappen probably could have done was get the fastest lap if he had timed the pit stops better and finished ahead of Leclerc rather than behind him. But that is, again, really splitting hairs kind of stuff. So Verstappen, I think he drove well and he came back nicely. Perez, again, I just think a bit more from him.
Harry, your thoughts on Red Bull? Do you think they got as much out of this weekend as they could following double Q2 elimination?
Verstappen did. I actually think Verstappen, we'll get on to driver of the day, but he's in contention for that because he flew under the radar somewhat, but I think he was actually pretty impressive given the pace of that car. So yeah, he's obviously was fortunate with Russell going out on the last lap, and a couple, Alonso falling out of the top 10 sort of thing. But yeah, so Verstappen scraped as much as he could from that performance. Perez was less convincing, should we say? Bashed into everyone apparently, and just to get his way through. But such an odd weekend. I already am in fear about what Max Verstappen is going to do to us all in Suzuka next weekend as revenge. But we'll have to see. But yeah, they interviewed Papatoto straight after the race on Sky, and he was saying we pointed this out. They had the similar weird race in Singapore when they came here, where they were dominating, and it's just perhaps a unique track that, I don't know, something for a car that's dominant is it just throws a spanner in the works that they can't adapt to. So I don't think they're washed. Won't say Max Verstappen washed is yet, but yeah, a very strange weekend for them. But it had to happen at some point. But it happened in quite dramatic fashion. I mean, you would have thought maybe they might be second, but they were nowhere near really all weekend. So an odd one for sure. But like I say, they'll probably be back in Suzuka.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, from Max Verstappen's perspective, people probably won't want to hear it on a weekend like this, given it is the first time this season he's finished worse than second. So, it will probably forever stand out as this really weird result in what was an epic season. But it really was a very good performance from him. People won't say that it was, but it absolutely was. In that, we referenced this in the preview and indeed during qualifying review yesterday, that overtakes are difficult to happen around here. Yes, the track configuration changed slightly this year, which helped a little bit, but not a huge amount, to be honest. And yeah, I think ultimately he probably took every chance that he could. I think he dispatched of cars relatively quickly. We know that as soon as he got on the back of Esteban Ocon in the first stint, that probably wasn't going to happen. But that was par for everyone. It was a case where unless you did have brand new tyres on versus tyres that were 20 laps old, you probably weren't going to make the moves. And Red Bull strategically, you can't blame them for this because they needed to try something different, but it just didn't pan out for them. They were desperately hoping for a safety car to happen essentially after everyone on the medium tyre had pit, but before they were going to pit on the hard tyre to take advantage of that reduced pit stop time. As it happened, they managed to, it's 20 laps in when the safety car came out, literally the perfect time for anyone on the medium tyres to go in and box. And at that point, what do you do if you're Verstappen and Perez? You've got an option. You can either go straight into the pits at that point, and you're going to be sat wherever you are until the end of the Grand Prix, basically, or you try something else and you keep going. But ultimately, you've got Carlos Sainz who knows that strategy is in play and is keeping the field as close together as he possibly can, in which case there's not much of a gap for Verstappen or Perez to come back into. And I guess that it's somewhat weirdly lucky that the VSC came out a few laps after they'd gone into the pits, which could have been disastrous for them. Ultimately, it kind of wasn't, and everyone who stayed out on those old hard tyres ended up giving way to Verstappen. So, that aspect of it worked out for them. But overall, this was not the way they would have wanted the race to pan out, to give Verstappen the best possible chance of getting up the field. Realistically, either way, I don't think he was getting on the podium. So a bit of a head scratcher for Red Bull. In terms of Sergio Perez, Sam, I know you've mentioned this already.
Hang on a second.
Yes,
was that Rosie giggling in the background?
Yes, I have a carrot.
With a carrot.
I have a carrot.
Oh my god!
Sorry, everyone. That is very disruptive. I shall put it down.
No, that's all right. I mean, after a performance like this, Sam, what do Red Bull do about Perez? Do they give him the carrot or the stick?
Oh, hey. God, Ben. So good. This is what we pay you for.
Disgusting.
It was one he has. So they give him the carrot on the stick. I think they give him a proper hiding. I'm not going to lie. I think, honestly...
Jesus. We don't endorse that. Do not endorse that.
Corporal punishment. No, thank you. But when you look at someone like Liam Lawson, who we're going to get onto, had an absolutely blinding race weekend. And you've got to feel for Yuki Tsunoda in this little situation, who, of course, again, has another DNF. He's had, a DNS in Monza. I think he finished last in Zandvoort. And now he doesn't get round to lap 10 at the Singapore Grand Prix. Meanwhile, every round, Liam Lawson, who is not necessarily in contention for the Red Bull seat right now, but who is building a fantastic CV of results in that junior team, has surely got to be showing what can be done. Even the few corners that he and Max Verstappen were side by side for each other, I was watching with a smile on my face because I thought, this guy's not giving up easily. He's having fun with it. He's fighting Max Verstappen, and it's fair. It's good wheel-to-wheel battling. You know, Verstappen's got to do it properly. We're not just seeing someone pull out the way and it's like, oh, free place because it's Red Bull. No, he was great. So when Sergio Perez can't even get past Liam Lawson for the majority of the Grand Prix, especially before they went for their pit stop onto the medium tyres, and Lawson was keeping him at bay so well. Sergio Perez has to be looked at this point. He has to be considered because if Mercedes, if McLaren, if Ferrari do take a proper step forward next season, and next year we get a lot more races like what happened right here in Singapore, and we're seeing, you know, Red Bull not dominate, we're seeing cars take a step above what they could do in certain areas, you need both drivers to be able to do what Max Verstappen was able to do today, to get back to 5th place. But they don't have that. In a close title fight, do I have confidence that Sergio Perez could do enough to bring back the title for Red Bull? I don't need to guess. I've already got an answer. 2021, they lost the Constructors' Championship because Sergio Perez was not good enough in comparison to the other team's second driver, Valtteri Bottas. I think Carlos Sainz and Leclerc beat them in an equal car. I think Hamilton and Russell beat them in an equal car. And currently, I think Norris and Piastri beat them in an equal car. So I do think that right now, they need to look elsewhere. And I think they need to set themselves up for the long haul for going into this new era of Formula One of, you know, when the new engine regs come in, we're having the new changes to some areas of the car for 2025. I think sooner rather than later, you got to get yourself someone who can sit there for a while because he's not cutting the mustard right now. He's looking a little bit naff, a bit rubbish. So for me, you give him the stick and the carrot can come to me or I will eat it while one of you talks.
Great stuff.
Good stuff. Let's go to driver of the day, shall we? Harry, who have you got?
Oh my God, Sam is actually eating his carrot. He's muted himself, so there's no crunching. Quite a few contenders for this. I'm not going to give it to him, but obviously mentioned Verstappen, quietly under the radar, but a pretty stellar drive from him. Liam Lawson, Oscar Piastri. Piastri?
I swear down, Piastri made up 10 positions in this Grand Prix.
Not mentioned him.
He made one overtake. Love it.
But yeah, just kept his head. You know, that man. He's a young man, but he's got like his head screwed on so well because he just seems so, I don't know, chilled. Like yesterday wasn't a good day for him, but he was like, yeah, we'll work on it tomorrow. It was just, he was fine with it. So yeah, Piastri is another one, but as I'm going first, I'll steal the obvious one, Carlos Sainz. I've already said it. I'll say it for a third time. A genius. He's my driver of the day.
Fair shout. I also had it written down to give Piastri a shout out because I think it was a very good recovery from where he started. I also want to give a shout out to Esteban Ocon. I thought he delivered a really good race out there. And I mean, he probably would have finished 6th if he was able to finish. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he was quite comfortably clear of Gasly as well. So I think he deserves a lot of respect for what he was able to do. The way he dispatched Perez in the way that Alonso wasn't was really impressive, especially against someone as experienced as Alonso. So I wanted to give him a shout out. I will give it to Carlos Sainz as well. I thought he was driver of the day, but just wanted to give a few extra shout outs. Sam, who have you got?
Yeah, I mean, I want to shout out similar people. 17th to 7th for Piastri incredible considering he doesn't even have the upgrades on the car that Norris has. I thought all that Frank lot did a fantastic job. I want to give a shout out to Liam Lawson, the first person ever to get debut points around Singapore. He was sensational, and I really do think he should have a seat next year, whether it be with AlphaTauri or they loan him to someone else. But he deserves to be there. Magnussen picks up a point as well. That car was not good, and they did really well to get themselves a point overall. But I'm going to have to go for the really obvious one that we've all gone for. The smooth operator is an actual genius and deserves all the credit he could get for this Grand Prix.
And worst driver of the day, Harry?
I was struggling on this one. I will give it to Logan Sargent, mainly because you shouldn't drive into a wall.
You've got a good point.
His pace this weekend was actually relatively good versus Albon, I thought, but in the race less so. And then he drove into a wall by himself. So I feel like it's an easy option, but I'll give it to Logan Corporal.
It's not a great move as a racing driver, is it?
It's not an ideal one.
Yeah, it's not great. I will admit that. Certainly, yes, I think Sargent is in contention for this award, and I'd written him down. I'm not going to give it to him, though, because even though, you shouldn't crash by yourself, wasn't a great race for Williams, and I don't think he'd have been able to salvage much, even if he performed very well. Fernando Alonso's my worst driver of the day.
It's a fair shout.
Made a mistake by himself in terms of in terms of the pit lane and not being able to stick to the line there. Again, he couldn't make it past Perez in the same way that Ocon did, and he lost the position there. And then obviously he went on by himself a bit later on in the Grand Prix as well, and didn't score any points. So it was weirdly non-Alonso. It was like he kind of, I don't know, he seemed like a rookie for one race only, which is odd.
He does. Did you remember is it Jeddah 2021, and he had an awful race. Like he spun, just having a day off. Not doing this one, lads.
It hasn't gone well. I've got all the bad luck now. Just release it all.
I'll get it out of the way.
Yeah, just get it out of the way. So next race, he's going to win.
He went down the escape road on purpose. Just get it out of the way.
Another mistake.
Your worst driver of the day, Sam?
Yeah, I can't disagree with you, Ben. Fernando Alonso, I think this might be one of the worst races I've seen Fernando Alonso have since he's come back to Formula One. It was a real shocker from him today. So many, errors made entirely by him and with no one else around him. Couldn't get the moves done where others could in cars that, in theory, are worse than his. Really not good. Sergio Perez, I think, deserves a bit of a shout-out as well here. As much as he did get back into the points, I think he was helped by Esteban's DNF. I think he was helped by the fact that the Haas's weren't very good. And I think the fact that he drove into multiple people and has somehow managed to get away with that also somehow releases him a little bit. But he was not good again. But Alonso was genuinely really quite bad. Amateur hour at Fernando Alonso's house, a delivery for one. That's a good line, that wasn't it?
Yeah, well on, mate. Big brain strategy, Harry.
Look, they won today, so I can't be too harsh on them. But the backing Leclerc into the other cars was screaming for them to get him mugged off in a safety car. And lo and behold, he got mugged off on a safety car. And I understand why they were saying it. Sorry, specifically, my big brain strat was, can you make 5 seconds in 5 laps? Like, drive extra slowly, Charles. He had to lose half a second per lap by that point because he was only 2.5 back. So I can see the logic-ish as to why they wanted that. And I don't think they were sacrificing Leclerc. But it was this is what they left themselves open for, and Leclerc got royally mugged off by it. So I'll go for that one. Ferrari, even though you won, you still got a big brain strap from me.
I'll give it semi-seriously for once in the... Yeah, I'll actually give it to the Carlos Sainz DRS thing because it was really intelligent. And of course, Ferrari still had to be told what he was doing rather than the other way around. It really should be Ferrari telling Carlos Sainz to, hey, keep Lando Norris and DRS to help yourself out. Instead, he had to go over team radio saying, yeah, I'm doing this on purpose, guys, just to let you know, which is brilliant. But yeah, I'm going to give it to Carlos Sainz for that. Sam?
I was going to give it to the Carlos Sainz move. I just want to give a shout out to Valtteri Bottas, who clearly thought he was in a Red Bull today by following the exact same strategy that Red Bull did. And then he just kept driving until his car broke down, which, hey, that works for you. But I think I'm going to have to give the award to Sainz. The IQ of that man, the fact that he's running the entire Ferrari business at this point, and I imagine both their road cars and sports cars whilst he's driving around Singapore at the same time, he deserves all the credit he could get. So both your answers were fantastic and the ones that I would have chosen myself.
Just a quick shout out as well to Lando Norris showing George Russell where the wall is and then George Russell deciding that looks fun.
He did that on purpose.
Exactly. Great dummy from Lando Norris there.
Big brain.
Right, we'll take our next break. We'll be discussing Charles Leclerc right after this. So whereas one Ferrari ended up on the top of the podium, the other Ferrari, despite being in P2 early on in the Grand Prix, did not make it to the podium and only barely survived Max Verstappen's late onslaught to finish 4th place. Of course, first race win for Ferrari this year, so it's been a while since Charles Leclerc has stood on the top step. Harry, from your perspective, do you think that Charles Leclerc and the team could have done more to get him on the podium here?
Potentially, yeah. As I just mentioned, I'm not sure it was the right call to make him back up the pack because he lost out massively from that. Having said that, I'm not sure Leclerc had the pace anyway. It might have been if he remained in P2 at that safety car, then he could have just held them off, as Sainz did for the rest of the race. But it was, I think they shot themselves in the foot slightly there. Having said that, I'm just not quite sure he had enough pace this weekend to be on the podium. He obviously qualified P3, but Norris and Russell were rapid, and obviously Hamilton too were rapid behind them. It might be difficult. So a tricky one. I don't want to blame them too much on that one. I know I gave them big brain strategy, but I'm not sure there was much more they could do apart from maybe not make him back up into the pack. So yeah, Leclerc will be disappointed. I just don't think he was quick enough, to be honest, which is a bit savage, but I just don't think it was.
And weird sounding.
Odd. Yeah. Very odd.
Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, how often have we ever said that Charles Leclerc simply is not quick enough? And I do agree with the general statement all weekend, not quick enough. But for me, they could have picked up more. I think they were flattered because, of course, Verstappen didn't get past him right at the end there. But equally, George Russell hitting the wall means that they picked up that extra spot that they wouldn't have done had he not essentially thrown himself into the barrier on the very final lap. He should be P5 rather than P4. It flatters just a little bit to make it not look as bad as it was. The fact that the gap between Sainz and Leclerc were 4 places, not 3, I think speaks volumes about just how good Sainz was here, but just how poor Charles Leclerc was. Now, the backing up, I understand Leclerc wanted to get the double stack and wanted to be able to be, fitting properly. But we all know that with a safety car, when every single driver on the grid is pretty much running the same strategy, that if a safety car comes out at the perfect time, 15 out of the 20 cars are all going to be diving in. Don't push yourself that far back to a queue of about 12 drivers because your pit box is only 2 in from the start. And when every person filters into the pit lane, you've got to sit there and wait to have a safe release. And Ferrari did the right thing. They held and they held and they held until an appropriate spot came about. But at that point, all the good work that he'd done in that first sector to get himself, the first stint rather, to get himself into second place on those soft tyres and sit behind Carlos Sainz and manage that gap was immediately undone. So I really do think that it's amazing how Ferrari can be so good on one side of the garage and so poor again on the other. I think most of the responsibility, though, has to sit on Leclerc. I really do think this has been one of his poorer Grand Prix, and I think he'll have to go away and reevaluate what's going on there. He's got to hope that this trend of Sainz being brilliant doesn't continue for his sake.
Yeah, I think from, at least if we go back to the start of the race, Charles Leclerc, the only driver in the top 10 to start on the soft compound tyre. It was a gamble and it worked out for them. Good start from Charles Leclerc, managed to get up to second place. And I think realistically, I somewhat agree and disagree in that I agree that Charles Leclerc didn't have the pace of a couple of the drivers around him. But I honestly think if he stays P2, I think that's where he stays until the end of the Grand Prix. I don't think he was slow enough to be overtaken by some of the other cars if they'd got the strategy right. And I mean, the strategy itself was right in that it was right to double stack. And I think it is probably the case where, I don't know if this is a trust thing again, because the gap that Leclerc managed to push himself essentially back into P3, 4, 5, 6, like, he gave himself more of a gap than you need to. Like, they comfortably double stacked. It wasn't like as soon as Leclerc came in, they were scrambling around. They had more than enough time between those two drivers in that I think if Leclerc trusted his team a little bit more, I think he could have probably given himself like 1 second or so to, still pull off the double stack. But you've always got the question in your mind of, is the team going to be able to pull this off if they don't have that extra 1 second I'm going to give them here by backing off a little bit more? So I don't know if that plays into it. Certainly, I agree. Pace-wise, he wasn't on the pace of Carlos Sainz this weekend. We said it after qualifying as well, that I think him being about 1/10 slower than Carlos Sainz was about the closest he got to him all weekend long. And ultimately, yeah, I mean, P4 is probably where he deserved to be on pure pace. But ultimately, strategy, I think probably, or the execution of strategy, maybe more accurately, I think cost him a spot on the podium here. And now we're looking at 19 points between himself and Carlos Sainz in the championship.
And then on the podium, you've got to remember, of course, that Sainz had a podium before 2 races ago, and it was all Leclerc, and now they're very, very close.
Indeed. Should we review some?
I'd like to not, but I also think that Harry deserves a round of applause for this one.
Come on.
Let's review some bold predictions, shall we? Let's start. All right, let's start with Sam. Get yours out of the way, Sam. We'll just get it out of the way early.
I did come around and say that Ferrari were only going to score 4 points as a team. I think they scored a lot more than that.
Yeah, times that by 9 and you're still wrong.
Couldn't have gone much worse. When they were 1 and 2, I really thought I was, in the mud at that point. I am quite dirty, but, was not good.
To be honest, though, I respect it because, as you know, on this podcast, we like to be wrong. So you can thank us for Ferrari getting their first win of the season.
Yeah, I'll take that. Thank you, Maranello. I'll expect a Ferrari in the mail.
Indeed. Mine didn't go much better. I said that there would be a double DNF for either Ferrari. Well, that didn't happen. For Mercedes, George Russell tried. He could have taken out his teammate at the same point, but decided not to. And Aston Martin, which we've already discussed this pre-episode, would have got into technicalities if Fernando Alonso had retired. And I was hoping that down in P17, he might just give up. Unfortunately, it's Fernando Alonso, so he doesn't know the meaning of that. And I was wrong. But one person who wasn't wrong was Harry Eade.
It was me.
Genuinely, we haven't had one right in so long that I'm actually happy you've got this point. I think it puts me even further behind, but I'm really pleased for you, mate.
By virtue of Harry getting it right and you getting it wrong, yes, there is a bigger gap.
I'm also trying to be really nice because the realization that I'm definitely going to have to give up my Twitter account for 24 hours is really starting to dawn on me.
Still a long way to go.
Yeah, but we don't get many right.
It's true. Law of averages. As after Friday practice, I was like, oh, this could be happening. But I still, to be honest, Verstappen still wasn't that far off. Like,
he tried.
Is it a couple more cars out of the way? I mean, one more lap, he would have been 4th because he would have got Leclerc.
Yeah.
And then one of those cars in front of him to disappear, and he still would have ruined my day. So thank you, Max, for not being quite that good.
I respect the bold prediction so much because you could have just said Verstappen not on the podium. That would have been sufficiently bold. You said both.
Cheers, Red Bull, for being bad.
You're not getting 2 points, but fair play to you.
Yeah, well done. Nothing but respect for it.
Okay, let's move on. Aston Martin. Well, they came into the weekend with a certain number of points. And if anyone on a chalkboard at home is keeping count, you won't need to rub out the numbers.
Nothing else has changed.
Yeah. They leave with as many as they started with. Lance Stroll, of course, didn't even take the start of the Grand Prix after his crash in qualifying on Saturday, although I think Mike Crack did confirm that he'd be fine for the Japanese Grand Prix, which takes place in a week's time. Fernando Alonso did start the Grand Prix, but by the end, he might not as well have done because he scored absolutely no points after quite a few things didn't go his way that we've kind of already discussed as a result of worst driver of the day. I think with Monza, we identified that as a Grand Prix that probably wasn't going to go well for them, and we were right. Here, Singapore, naturally you thought they might be able to muster up something else, but pace-wise, they just weren't there, Sam.
Yeah, this is, I think, any F1 team's biggest fear, that you go from one extreme to the other and you don't perform in either circumstance. You kind of think, okay, straight lines, heavy braking, you need top speed. We don't have that, and that's okay, we can accept it. But next race weekend, it's all twisty tight corners, very minimal throttle. You're only on the throttle for 50% of the whole lap. You need to have downforce in abundance. And okay, if we're not good at the first one, then we should be good at the last one. And we weren't good at either. So I brought this up a little while ago, maybe after the Australian or something Grand Prix around that time, Spanish, whatever it might have been. That I said that I think that Aston Martin are in trouble, and I think that they were, because they run almost a copycat style development system where they look at the big boys like Red Bull and go, what's working there and how do we bring that into play, whilst nabbing all of their engineers previously, that I think they've rung out of these ideas. And I think the originality has rung out, and they haven't decided to pick up their own journey of developing a car, and now it's biting them, now it's costing them. We're seeing the fall off in pace. You look at how McLaren have stepped up, running their own profile on their car. You see how Mercedes have started to understand the car works. Ferrari, we don't know when they're going to be good, but when they are good, they absolutely smash it out the park. A Red Bull, a Red Bull. Aston Martin, they've taken a few bits from Red Bull and they've taken a few of their personnel, and it's just now falling apart a little bit, and it's becoming a bit worrying that they've really, over the last few races, stepped so far away from the top boys. They are very much a midfield team at this point, and I'd argue that Alpine are on the brink of outscoring them more regularly than they're not. And this is pretty disastrous. And I brought it up a little while ago. All that money spent, all that time, all that investment, and they finished joint sixth with Alfa Romeo last year, and this year at this point they're on a massive risk of finishing fifth, and if it doesn't get better again, they could be at massive risk of finishing fifth again next year. All that money for nothing. So this is a real panic stations moment, I think, for Aston Martin. They need to get their eggs together and adapt and hope that they can pull it off for either the end of this year and get some more points, or consolidate and push forward for a really big 2024.
It is ironic that a lot of the pre-race media questions were around, can they get back into second? Looking at the standings now, they are 72 points behind Mercedes in second place. They're only 78 clear of McLaren in fifth. So they can be somewhat thankful for that George Russell DNF, because otherwise they would be closer to fifth than they are to second at this stage. What are your thoughts, Harry, on this one and them just not seemingly having a lot of pace?
Hypothesis here, which I know is a dangerous thing for me to say.
It's a big word.
He gets a bold prediction right now. He thinks he knows everything. Yeah,
big brain man.
Science over
it. To a point Sam just made, were Aston Martin not great here because their car is like a Red Bull?
We know there are similarities.
Well, anyway, just putting that one out there. It could be, because you're right. We fully expected them to be in the mix, and I do wonder. I know Stroll was really struggling in qualifying yesterday, and then struggled even more when he crashed. I do wonder whether Alonso dragged that car slightly further up the grid than it actually should have been in qualifying, because they didn't look great really today. Oh well, the one car didn't look great. Alonso, I was I said this. I've watched this with my dad, and I said I wasn't sure whether Alonso was slow or he was just like keeping a gap. And then after half the race had gone by, I was like, nah, he's just slow. He doesn't have any more pace. It's a worry because we fully expected them to be on form here. I think Suzuka might be tougher again for them, but it's an odd one because I don't think the form book I don't think has fully dropped off, and this is why I brought up that point about is it because it's similar to the Red Bull, because Zandvoort, they were well up there again, or at least Alonso was. So I don't know whether this is just a very weird Singapore specific thing, but as you say, it's considering the start of the year, it's getting a bit squeaky for them now as to whether they can hold on to fourth, which, take us back 3 or 4 months. I don't think we would have even considered that. So it's not an ideal day. And I think that's the first time this season Alonso's not been in the points, right? I think he's been in the top 10 every race apart from that one.
Yeah, it is the first time.
Bad day.
Yeah, I think there might be some accuracy in that hypothesis you just gave. The problem is, if it's going to work like it does here, it needs to also work when Red Bull are good. And that wasn't the case with Monza, in that they won Monza and Aston Martin scored 2 points. So, it was a surprise. I expected Alonso and Aston Martin to be quicker than this weekend. I predicted them to get a podium, which almost certainly led to their demise. But yeah, I don't think pure pace-wise, they were probably level playing with Alpine. Probably. I mean, they were slow. They were definitely slower than Ferrari, than Mercedes, than Red Bull, than McLaren. And I think maybe then at that point, they're somewhere around where Alpine were. But it's a far cry from where they were at the beginning of this year. We heard how quick Aston Martin were at the beginning of this year, and a lot of comments that Fernando Alonso made about how beautiful the car was to drive. And now we're in a position where they're just so far away from that. And he called it undrivable. Based on the evidence, it was. I mentioned on the preview podcast that I think Alonso and Aston Martin are under pressure at the moment to build a bit of a gap over Lewis Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship, with some of the races coming up that we don't think they'll be particularly quick at, namely Abu Dhabi, Austin, Las Vegas. And this is arguably one of the 3 that we thought that they were going to be good at. So slightly worrying times ahead. And you're right, Sam, given the start of this year, if the end result is 1 position gained on where they were last year, it's an improvement. But you kind of have to view that as a failure versus what it could have been. Okay, we'll take our final break. We'll be back with moment of the race submissions right after this. Okay, moment of the race. I'm giving Harry control of the soundboard here, which is truly terrifying. But hey, he got a bold prediction right. He can do whatever he wants in this episode.
Hey, I normally play these out anyway, so, you know.
I mean, on the actual soundboard, though. Me and the soundboard have a real connection.
Yeah,
no,
true.
you don't. You hate each other.
It's a love-hate relationship.
Are we going first, or are we letting them go first?
We'll go first, shall we?
Like we don't always every time.
Of the race, Harry.
Yeah, I know, it was weird. Who's going first? Me or Sam?
You are. You.
You're talking.
Me.
You can do it.
My moment of the race. There were a few, actually. I got to say a shout out to, and again, sorry, this is quite Sky specific, but shout out to a couple of Sky moments on there. One being Ted Kravitz shouting, "Shoot George," when he's talking about trying to overtake Sainz. The other one, which wasn't even in the race, but was on the grid, was Martin Brundle asking Oscar Piastri a question, putting the microphone to his mouth for the answer, and then turning away and shouting, "Happy birthday, Esteban," as Ocon walks past him.
And Oscar Piastri bolts it.
Doesn't care. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, see you later, mate. I will settle for... Also, shout out to Hamilton just not doing turn 1. I thought it was inspired. Fernando Alonso tactics.
Fernando was proud.
Yeah, he was proud of that one. No, but my favourite one was Logan Sargent's just crashed, got around to the pits, made it back, new front wing, safety car deployed. And then there's a shot of the safety car coming down the straight with Logan Sargent behind it, weaving his, like warming up his tyres. And then the safety car's like, go past Logan, go away.
Get on with it, Logan.
And it's like they have the green light that comes on the safety car for lapped cars, right? Which was on. And it's almost like Logan was like, I'll pretend I didn't see that. And then the hand coming out the window of the safety car was gold. So that was mine.
Moment of the race for me. I do want to give a shout out. Just hearing the Italian national anthem.
Oh, so good.
I'm completely unbiased. I don't care who wins or how they win or what team it is, but I just really like the Italian national anthem. It is, as I think Beef might have said in our Discord, an absolute bop. But my actual moment of the race was very, very early on. My moment of the race was Yuki Tsunoda picking up a puncture. Now, if that's Fernando Alonso, he is dragging that car around to the pits. He is getting out of the car to push it to the pits. Yuki Tsunoda picks up a puncture. Nah, I'm done, lads. See,
one corner.
It's my home race next week. I'll get ready for that.
He did one corner.
No, Logan Sargent is dragging around a scrap heap of garbage around to the pits to get that racing again. Yuki Tsunoda picks up a puncture. So, well, that's not four wheels. Can't do it. Never mind.
Lewis Hamilton's won a race on 3. Yuki Tsunoda can't go around one corner. He
didn't think about it.
No,
not
better park up here, lads. Cheers.
Your one, Sam.
Speaking of Sky, I think I text you guys this. Absolutely love the conversation about going to an all-you-can-eat takeaway, and he says he hopes you get your Hungry Appetite song because there's plenty to gobble up, which is a real moment from Crofty. Also, as we've already mentioned, Sainz getting his debut, getting his maiden wing for Ferrari, which is just such a blunder for a lead commentator. But my moment of the race is the fight at the front between Sainz, Norris, Hamilton and Russell. I was stood up for a lot of it, just realising that you can see me on camera here, folks. This is what it looked like.
Sam, standing.
For
Sam.
audio listeners, Sam is standing.
I have stood, and you can't really see my head. And I imagine that my screen had that exact view. But it was brilliant, and I loved it, and I want to see more of that because it was fantastic.
Also, sorry, one more shout out to Esteban Ocon sending Sergio Perez for an absolute bag of chips when he overtook him.
Get wrecked,
filthy,
son.
Absolutely filthy.
Le plan until the engine crook.
Oh, thank you, Gasly, for getting more points. So my teammate Wars is I'm flying high. I am flying high.
Oh,
and Magnussen got the point as well. So
it's great.
Aren't they equal?
Oh, that's close now. Yeah, I'm not sure actually.
I'm gonna have to look.
I don't know.
Might be 6-5. I'm not sure. Right, let's hear from some of our Discord submissions. If you do want to get involved. If you want to get involved in this segment or indeed our preview segment as well, you can just get in the submission channel and we play out a select number on both preview and review episodes. So, Harry, take us away.
Fingers crossed, everyone. We're on the old soundboard today, so here we go. First up,
press the live button.
Yes, I've done that. Cheers, Ben.
Good.
First up is Scott. Oh God, you lot with all your demands. All right, Skyler.
Lando Norris hit the wall.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
George Russell might have hit it harder, but he did it the wall. Yeah,
he did it first.
Took a real double slap to the face on that lap, didn't it? Been there all race. It was bam, bam.
Yeah, I even moved. Did you see, by the way, that when Stroll hit the wall yesterday, it moved it back like half a metre, like the actual concrete.
Mad.
That's crazy. Damn. Next up is a first-timey, I believe, El Plan Sam, which is a great name.
Great name.
Hey guys, first time submitter here. Absolutely love the podcast. I know literally probably everyone is going to say this, but moment of the race, I totally called it like 10 laps before it happened. Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris working together to hold off the Mercedes. Sainz being a smooth operator. I can't even get over it. I don't think if during Red Bull's crazy run before the summer break, you said the first person to knock them off the top step is going to be Carlos Sainz. Like, don't get me wrong, he's a great driver, but I don't think any of us saw that coming. Also, Liam Lawson scoring points. Daniel Ricciardo better watch out.
You better watch out,
guys.
Cheers, Chris. It was really interesting to see two different drivers, as in two different teams, somewhat working. I think Sainz was helping Norris, perhaps more than Norris was necessarily helping Sainz. I think Norris might well have grabbed that race win if it had opened up for him. But it's a good point nonetheless.
Okay, next up is Callie70, who I'm sure is very excited.
What a race! What a race! Finally, Red Bull does not win a race. And on top of it, what a 1 and 2. Lando. What a moment of the race is the final couple laps. Sainz helping Norris out to get second place. Oh my God. Two different teams helping each other. The bromance lives on. Let's go. McLaren on P2, baby. Sorry for George, though. That's man.
The come down at the end. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, George. Go on. Oh, my Lord. Okay, next is Hazard with a cameo, apparently, from Northern George. So brace yourselves, everyone.
Right, boys. Return to Northern George. What was your moment of the race, pal?
Well, moment of the race, got to be winning some money. Carlos Sainz, beautiful.
How much you win?
Just the £50.
Hey. Any ideas what you're going to spend your winnings on?
Oh, I'm just going to get a huge takeaway. So we're going to have a large house kebab, garlic bread supreme, chips with gravy, and 10 pieces of onion rings. Beautiful.
Cheers, boys.
10 piece onion rings. Great choice.
I reckon.
Northern if you try.
I reckon there'll be a good chunk of our audience who didn't understand what George has said, but
I don't think I did, to be honest.
Enjoy your kebab, mate. Enjoy it.
Enjoy your winnings. I'm happy for you, Northern George. Blimey. Okay. Very much two different places. Northern Texas is next.
Oh, hello, my friends. It is I, Norm from Texas, and I am here to give you my late-breaking moment of the race and my late-breaking not-so-good moment of the race. My late-breaking moment of the race, that is a four-way battle for first. It's what we live for in this sport. My downvote of the race. My God, TV director, here is some advice. Maybe if there are overtakes happening, don't cut to an overhead shot of a highway overpass.
He's not wrong.
Anyway,
actually.
keep breaking late.
He's not
wrong. I like the new feature downvote of the race.
Yeah. Not done that before, but love
Don't
it.
remember asking for that, but yeah.
Okay, one car guy, or the one car guy, sorry, is next.
Hey, what up, guys? The one car guy here with my fourth mission ever. And my moment of the race today was the last 10 laps when the Mercedes were catching up to Lando and Carlos Sainz. That was crazy. Lando defending for his life, Carlos helping him, both Mercedes fighting for it. And then George was like, nope, I ain't finishing this race. I'm hitting the wall. Well, that was it. You guys keep doing what you're doing. Join the Discord right now. Love y'all.
Cheers, one car guy.
One more and you get your 5-time badge.
Yeah.
Oh, do you remember getting those when you used to go swimming and you used to get like a 5-meter bag and whatnot? It was sponsored by Frosties, weren't they? By Toby the Tiger. Yeah. They're great.
Oh, so niche.
5-meter badge, that's such a little distance. What is the point of that?
Get on with it. Swim further than that.
All right, next up is SoCal Jen.
Hey, it's Jen from SoCal. My moment of the race is just that battle for first place. That was amazing. When you take Red Bull out of the equation, OMG. That was spicy. And I'm so happy Hamilton got a podium. Woohoo! Join the Patreon.
For that reason.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Big up SoCal.
Uncommon Hoodlum is next.
What a race, boys. My moment of the race absolutely has got to be Esteban Ocon going to war to get a couple of positions off of Fernando Alonso and Sergio Perez. Sometimes the sausages are out for Gasly, but today the bacon is out for Ocon.
Yes. Love it. Bacon
Love
out
that.
for Ocon.
A new phrase has been unlocked.
Get your bacon out for Ocon.
Bacon
That's part of the plan.
Oh, yes. Got a whole
Get your rations
barbecue
out
with
for
it.
Esteban.
Yeah, rations for Ocon. And they're extra smoky.
Oh, yeah. Well, they would be today when his car blew up. Anyway.
Smoke on.
Smoke on.
Smoke on bacon.
Okay. Wrath is next. Wrath.
Behave.
No, come on.
Behave.
Doing so well.
Oh, bloody hell.
The wrath
All right.
of the soundboard.
Sorry, Wrath. I'm sure it was really good. We'll go for last up is Carlos Sainz fan, I believe. Tenerife beef, or berated beef, or whatever she's called this week.
Hello. What a race. I don't think I'm ever going to recover as a Carlos Sainz fangirl. This is why I put £25 on him every year to win the Drivers' Championship.
What a waste of money that is.
George been in it. I'm sorry, but I don't know why I've got a little bit of George Russell hatred in me. But it felt good to me, but also the race was already good, and it was just that cherry on top of the cake. Okay, bye.
You know that irrational hate? I have it for a couple of people, like Stephen Mulhern, Bruce Forsyth. So I understand.
Sadistic beef there. Enjoying George's downfall. Hateful beef.
That's all right. Let us know what you spend your 25 quid on when you don't have it at the end of this year. Never mind.
Send it to us next year, please.
Yeah, I'd say it would be a better investment, but not so sure, to be honest. No. I guess that's going to do it for this review. But the good news is we've got another preview coming up very shortly. It's one of two opportunities during the year where we get to complain about being Europeans. For when we do that during the midweek, which is almost definite, just make sure we are being ironic about it. Trust us, we are. But until then, Sam, if you wouldn't mind getting us out of here.
Folks, I hope you enjoyed the Singapore Grand Prix and this review as much as we have. We've had a lovely time, and make sure you tune in, of course, midweek for the Japanese preview. The one, as Ben said, we have to get up super duper early. But that's okay. You'll just hear us moaning about it anyway. We are on social media, Late Breaking F1 everywhere, and on the YubTub, so get subscribed because there is video of this and most other content that we make. We also have 2 extras every single month for you Patreon subscribers, and they are all ad-free. Every bit of content you get on Patreon is ad-free, including all the standing episodes. Also, Beer with Breaking. It's a laugh. The last time we talked about the crazy frog. So if you do want to hear us talking about the crazy frog and what we think of steak, then, get subscribed. Have a little listen. You also get a birthday shout out for those top tiers. It's a lovely time. That's it. We had a good time. We're going to go and relax now. In the meantime, I've been Samuel Sage.
I've been Ben Hocking.
And I've been Harry Eads.
And remember, keep breaking late.
I've got a carrot.